Hey everyone, it's Dave here from the Human First Project. I want to talk to you today about something that we might call the stress response cycle, which describes the natural way the human body and mind is meant to deal with stress. Let's look back at our early ancestors. One of the most common things that we might talk about when we think about the stress response is this early ancestor here that's walking around minding his own business in a relatively calm, relaxed, neutral state. And then all of a sudden, from out the bushes jumps this huge, ferocious saber-toothed tiger. There is a very credible, real threat that this early caveman now needs to deal with. There is something very obvious in front of him that might endanger his life. And so there's a couple of things that happen. There is a physical, chemical, biological response within the body that fundamentally changes how the body reacts. You might see things like widening of the pupils so they can take in more information. Your heart rate and your blood pressure will be naturally elevated, pumping more oxygen around the body to allow you to respond physically, heightened awareness, all that kind of thing that you will need to respond to this threat. And then, of course, we've got a couple of choices what we do. Once our senses, our bodily functions are heightened, we can either stand there and choose to fight this ferocious beast, or we can run away, what we very commonly know as the fight or flight response. Once the threat is over and that saber-toothed tiger, we've either beat it to death, unlikely, or we've managed to escape back to the safety of our cave. Those chemicals in the body start to flush out and we return back to a very, ultimately, a calm, relaxed, neutral state when there is no more threat. And then the cycle is complete. But here is where it becomes a problem. These days, we'd have very, very little physical threats to our safety. We have things these days that we might call psychological threats, and it could be things like your kids maybe stressing you out over the summer holidays. We might be worried about money and have some financial troubles. We might be worried about what politicians are doing. We might even be stressed over what people are or are not saying, commenting, clicking, liking on social media. These days, the things that cause us stress are very, very different than millions of years ago. These things are unlikely to kill us, but the brain and body still react in exactly the same way. The challenge we face is because all those psychological threats very rarely go away. Your kids hopefully aren't going to go away. Politicians are always there. We're always worried about social media. We've got some long term financial problems. The stress response cycle is never complete, and we end up stuck in this red zone almost for very prolonged periods of time where our senses are heightened, our blood pressure is elevated, perhaps our heart rate is going a little bit quicker than it needs to. And we all hopefully understand long term that can have some real severe consequences mentally and physically. So, the stress cycle isn't complete in itself because we haven't escaped from that saber-toothed tiger, so we need to do something about it. We need to take action to complete that cycle ourselves. What can we do? I'm going to give you three things now that you can do to complete that cycle yourself and return back to that neutral state. Number one, very, very simple exercise. You don't need to do a marathon, you don't need to do anything over dramatic, just moving the body. The best things you can do for relieving stress and anxiety is something that requires forward motion, running, walking. When we complete forward motion, like that physical activity, it sends those chemicals to the brain that we are now safe. This is why you always feel better after a nice walk or after going for a run. Any kind of activity, it doesn't have to be particularly dramatic or overly exerting, but forward motion is the best for stress. Number two, hugging someone, ideally someone that you know, like, love. The golden time is around about 20 seconds, so you need to find someone where it's not going to be really uncomfortable and awkward. That releases all sorts of chemicals within the brain and body to bring you back to that neutral state. Find someone you love and give them a really big squeeze. And the third one, surprise, surprise, is getting a really, really good night's sleep. When we sleep, when we have undisturbed sleep, those chemicals in our brain and body are regulated. Your body does this all by itself without you having to consciously do anything. We've all heard that saying, you'll feel better after a good night's sleep. Sleep on it, whatever it may be. And it's true. Your body will naturally return to a neutral state if you allow it to by getting a good night's sleep. If you'd like to know more about stress and how you can manage stress, cope with stress, maybe even avoid it altogether, then get in touch, drop a comment below, and I'll send you a message. Have a great day.